I was in my 30s, and I didn't drink. I moved to a neighborhood out in the island where they had parties every Saturday. And I started to drink with them. Before I knew it, I was hung up on this stuff. I couldn't believe it. Same with smoking.
In 1961, The Dick Van Dyke Show made television history. But behind the perfect family image, jealousy and tension tore the cast apart. Now at 99, Dick Van Dyke breaks his silence about the real drama, the star who felt betrayed, the crush he couldn't confess, and why his co-star didn't speak to him for years. Dick Van Dyke was born on December 13th, 1925, in West Plains, Missouri. It was a small town with only a few thousand people, and his early life seemed simple. His mother, Hazel, worked as a typist, and his father, Lorenz, sold cookies for a company. They lived an ordinary life, but nobody could have guessed that Dick would one day become a famous entertainer. The town itself was small, but it had a surprising history of producing stars like Porter Wagoner and Jan Howard. It's funny to think that the year Dick was born, Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush came out, a movie full of the kind of comedy Dick would later become famous for. When Dick was still a child, his family moved to Danville, Illinois. Danville was a bigger town with about 30,000 people. Dick said it felt like most of the town was made up of his relatives because everyone knew each other. It was the 1930s during the Great Depression, and money was tight for almost everyone. Dick's family couldn't afford a radio, so they went to a neighbor's house to listen to popular shows. Those moments sparked his love for entertainment. Danville also turned out to be a special place for talent. Some of Dick's classmates, like Donald O'Connor from Singin' in the Rain and singer Bobby Short, also became stars. In high school, Dick thought he might become a minister, but everything changed when he joined the drama club. He discovered he loved singing and dancing, and he was good at it. Back then, because of World War II, schools had to write their own plays and musicals since they couldn't afford to buy rights to famous shows. Dick got the best roles because he was tall and had a strong voice. Even though the productions weren't fancy, they gave him a taste of performing. Many years later, in 2004, he returned to his old high school to get his diploma and even performed in Bye Bye Birdie with the students. It shows how much those years meant to him. In 1944, when he was still in high school, Dick decided to join the U.S. Army Air Forces. He wanted to be a pilot during World War II, but there was a problem. He was too skinny. At 6 feet 1 inch and only 135 pounds, he didn't meet the weight requirement. He didn't give up. He ate bananas and drank water until he finally weighed enough to pass. Once he joined, he realized flying planes wasn't for him. Instead, he got transferred to a special unit where he entertained troops. He painted sets, acted in shows, and even worked as a radio announcer. Dick later joked that being scared of flying is what pushed him into show business. He served until 1946, and those years helped him discover his love for performing. When Van Dyke was 22 in 1947, he got his first job as a radio DJ at WDN, a small station in Danville. He had no experience, but he walked into the station, asked for an audition, and got hired right away. He hosted the morning show from 7 a.m. to noon and quickly became a favorite. He had a natural talent for making people laugh and would create funny characters and voices during his broadcasts. One of his most popular segments was called Man on the Street, where he interviewed local people in a playful, joking way. On April 1st, 1948, he played a huge prank by convincing everyone in town that a UFO had landed. It caused so much chaos that the police got flooded with calls. He almost got fired, but instead it made him even more famous in Danville. Later that year, Van Dyke met Phil Erickson, a performer who specialized in pantomime. Erickson liked Van Dyke's humor and suggested they team up as a comedy duo. They called themselves, Eric and Van, the Merry Mutes. Their act was very different from anything people had seen before. They performed silent routines, lip-syncing to old songs while acting out funny situations. One of their most popular acts was pretending to be an opera singer and a frustrated conductor, switching roles to make the audience laugh. From 1947 to 1953, the Merry Mutes toured nonstop, performing in clubs on the West Coast. They worked incredibly hard, sometimes doing 5 shows every night of the week. In 1950, they performed 35 shows in 1 week in Los Angeles. setting a new record. Their big break came in 1951 when they got their own TV show called The Mary Mutes Show on WSB-TV in Atlanta. This helped them get noticed nationally, and they even performed on The Ed Sullivan Show in 1952. Their act, like the slow-motion football routine, made them popular across the country. But in 1953, Erickson decided to quit show business, and the partnership ended. Van Dyke, however, kept going. After the Mary Mutes, Van Dyke focused on television. In 1955, he became the host of the CBS Morning Show. He brought his humor and creativity to the program, working alongside a puppeteer named Bill Beard to come up with funny skits and characters. In 1956, he tried hosting a game show called To Tell a Lie, but it only lasted for 13 episodes. Still, it gave him more experience in live television. Van Dyke's acting talent started to shine in 1957 when he appeared on the Phil Silvers Show. He played two very different characters in two separate episodes, a hillbilly baseball player and a country cousin. Audiences loved him, and the show's creator even thought about giving Van Dyke his own spin-off, though it never happened. In 1959, Van Dyke got a chance to perform on Broadway in a musical called The Girls Against the Boys. The show didn't last long. It closed after just 16 performances. But Van Dyke stood out. One of his best moments was a song called The Telephone Song, where he acted out both sides of a phone call while dancing around a telephone booth. This performance got him noticed by critics and producers. He even won a Theater World Award for being a promising newcomer. More importantly, it led to his next big role in the musical Bye Bye Birdie, which would change his life. Dick Van Dyke's life changed forever in 1961 when he was picked to play Rob Petrie in The Dick Van Dyke Show. At first, this role wasn't even meant for him. The show's creator, Carl Reiner, wrote the character based on his own life and wanted to play Rob himself. But a producer named Sheldon Leonard thought Dick Van Dyke was perfect for the role, especially after seeing him perform on Broadway in Bye Bye Birdie. Dick even beat Johnny Carson, who was also being considered for the role. It wasn't an easy decision. Just 18 days before the show was supposed to start, CBS executives were still unsure. Late one night, they finally made their choice and picked Dick. He had less than 3 weeks to get ready, but that last-minute decision turned out to be the best one for everyone. At first, Dick didn't make much money. For the first season, he earned $1,250 for each episode. That's about $1,000 in today's money. But as the show became more popular, his pay went up a lot. By the final season, he was making $35,000 per episode. The show had a rocky start, though. At first, it wasn't very popular, and CBS almost canceled it. But Procter & Gamble, a big advertiser, stepped in to save it. They told CBS they would stop buying ads if the show got cut. This gave the show another chance, and soon it became a huge hit. By the second season, it was one of the top 10 shows on TV. One of the best parts of the show was the chemistry between Dick and Mary Tyler Moore, who played his wife Laura. Their connection on screen felt so real that people loved watching them. There was a big age difference between them. Dick was 36, and Mary was just 25 when the show started. Producers were worried about this at first, but it didn't matter once they saw how good they were together. Later, Mary even said something surprising in an interview. She joked, "The amazing thing is we never had an affair. I always thought it was a terrible waste." Even though there might have been some unspoken feelings, they kept things professional and it worked perfectly. The other cast members also played a big role in making the show special. Maury Amsterdam, who played Buddy Sorrell, loved the show so much that he wrote lyrics for the theme song, even though they weren't used. Rose Marie, who played Sally Rogers, thought she would be the main female star. But as Mary's character became more popular, her role got smaller. This caused some tension on set, but everyone worked hard to make the show a success. The Dick Van Dyke Show was also different from most sitcoms at the time. It didn't use fake laughs. Instead, it was filmed in front of a real audience, and their reactions were genuine. Each episode was performed twice, once to test how the audience reacted, and then again for filming. This gave the writers time to adjust the jokes and make them better. The show also had fun little surprises. like the famous opening scene where Rob trips over the ottoman. Sometimes he tripped, and sometimes he didn't. This small touch kept viewers guessing and made the show feel fresh. Dick Van Dyke's big break in movies came in 1963 with Bye Bye Birdie. He played Albert Peterson, a songwriter trying to make it big while caught in a crazy publicity stunt. He had already played this role on Broadway and even won a Tony Award for it. But the movie version was different. The story was changed to focus more on Anne Margaret's character Kim McAfee. The director loved Anne Margaret so much that he gave her extra scenes, even opening and closing the movie with her. This upset Van Dyke, because his character wasn't as important in the movie as it had been on stage. Still, he gave a great performance, and the movie was a big hit, earning over $13 million. Even though he was 37, playing a man in his 20s, his energy and charm made it believable. The movie also caught Walt Disney's attention, and this led to Van Dyke's most famous role. In 1964, Van Dyke starred as Bert the Chimney Sweep in Mary Poppins. This role made him a worldwide star. He danced, sang, and brought humor to the movie, which became a huge hit, earning over $100 million. But there's one thing people never let him forget: his bad Cockney accent. Even Van Dyke jokes about it now, saying it was terrible. He said his accent coach, who was Irish, wasn't any better at it than he was. Surprisingly, nobody told him how bad it sounded during filming. Despite this, people loved his performance, especially the big step in time dance scene. That scene was really tough to film. Van Dyke, who was 41 at the time, had to keep up with much younger dancers. It took 23 takes to get it right, and he said it was the hardest dance he ever did. Van Dyke also played another character in Mary Poppins, the old bank director, Mr. Dawes Sr. He wasn't credited for this role in the movie. Instead, the credits listed a fake name, Navkid Keed, which is just Dick Van Dyke scrambled up. He even had to convince Walt Disney to let him play this part by doing a screen test to look older. Van Dyke removed his false teeth, giving him a thin and aged look. After Mary Poppins, Van Dyke starred in Chitty Chitty Bang Bang in 1968. He played Caractacus Potts, an inventor who creates a magical flying car. The movie was full of fun details, like how the car had parts from an old World War I airplane. Van Dyke couldn't drive a manual car, so they had to use special automatic versions for him. One of the hardest scenes to film was the Me-Oh-El bamboo dance. Just like in Mary Poppins, it took 23 takes to finish. The movie became a family favorite, even though filming it wasn't easy. In 1969, Van Dyke tried something different with the comic. This movie wasn't light and fun like his earlier films. It was about a silent film comedian named Billy Bright, whose life fell apart because of his own mistakes. The movie starts with Billy's funeral and shows his story through flashbacks. Van Dyke's acting in this movie was serious and emotional, showing a different side of him. The movie didn't make much money, but over time, people came to appreciate it for how it showed the struggles of fame and the silent film era. After the Dick Van Dyke Show ended in 1966, Dick Van Dyke returned to TV with the new Dick Van Dyke Show in 1971. This time, he played Dick Preston, a talk show host living in Phoenix, Arizona. The show aired on September 18th, exactly 10 years after his first hit series started. It was different from his earlier show, focusing on serious topics like interracial dating and marriages without kids, subjects that couldn't have been discussed in the 1960s. Despite these fresh ideas, the show didn't do well. Writer Carl Orstein later said the ratings were really bad. In the last season, the story moved to Hollywood, and Dick's character became a soap opera actor. But even that change didn't save the show. Behind the scenes, there were arguments, and things got worse when CBS banned an episode called Lieutenant Preston of the 4th Cavalry. This upset Carl Reiner, a key writer, and he quit. Without him, Van Dyke felt the show couldn't continue. It ended in 1974 after 72 episodes. In 1993, when Van Dyke was 67, he returned to TV with Diagnosis: Murder, a mix of medical drama and crime solving. He played Dr. Mark Sloan, a doctor who worked with his son, Detective Steve Sloan, to solve crimes. His real-life son, Barry Van Dyke, played the detective, which added a fun family dynamic to the show. Audiences loved it, and the show ran for 8 seasons, ending in 2001. It had 178 episodes and 5 TV movies, making it one of Van Dyke's biggest successes. Fans especially enjoyed episodes that celebrated his career, like one where his Dick Van Dyke Show co-star Rosemarie made an appearance. In 1999, at 73, Van Dyke returned to Broadway after almost 40 years. He starred in The Gin Game with Mary Tyler Moore, reuniting decades after their time on The Dick Van Dyke Show. They played 2 nursing home residents battling over games of gin rummy, and their performances were praised. Van Dyke nearly turned down the role because of arthritis, but after hip surgery, he felt strong enough to do it. The play ran for 145 shows and was later adapted into a TV movie in 2003. Even as he got older, Van Dyke stayed active. In 2006, at 80, he appeared at night at the museum as a funny but sneaky night guard. He performed his own stunts, including a tricky jump over a counter, proving he still had amazing energy. The movie was a huge hit, earning over $574 million worldwide. In 2018, at 91, he amazed audiences again in Mary Poppins Returns. He danced on a desk in a big musical number, doing all the moves himself with no stunt double. Everyone on set was shocked at how energetic and sharp he was. Even in his 90s, Van Dyke never stopped inspiring people. At 89, he wrote a memoir called Keep Moving, and other tips and truths about aging, sharing how he stayed happy and active. At 91, he appeared in a music video dancing with his wife Arlene, who is much younger than him. The video went viral, showing the world his unstoppable joy for life. On his 96th birthday in 2021, he celebrated by singing with his a cappella group, The Fantastics, which he started in 2000. In a video shared online, he looked full of life as he led the group in a cheerful song. Even in his 90s, Dick Van Dyke proved that age is just a number if you stay passionate and keep moving. Dick Van Dyke married Margie Willett on February 12, 1948. They grew up together in Danville, Illinois, but didn't have enough money for a wedding. So they got married on a live radio show called Bride and Groom. The show's producers paid for their wedding and honeymoon, but in return, millions of people listened to them say their vows live on the air. They had 4 children, Christian, Barry, Stacy, and Carrie Beth. At first, their life seemed happy, but things weren't easy. Van Dyke was becoming a star, and his Hollywood career kept him busy. Margie didn't like the spotlight. She preferred a quiet life. She didn't wear makeup and kept her hair short, and people sometimes thought they were siblings instead of a married couple. Over time, this difference pushed them apart. After 36 years, their marriage ended. While all of this was happening, Van Dyke was fighting a personal battle. He struggled with alcohol for more than 25 years. It started when he was in his 30s and becoming famous for the Dick Van Dyke Show. At first, he drank to feel less shy, but it got out of control. By the 1970s, things were so bad that he decided to get help. In 1972, he went to a hospital for 3 weeks to try to stop drinking. He later said he scared himself when he realized how much drinking had changed him. He wasn't the happy, friendly person he used to be. He was getting angry and aggressive, which was nothing like the man people saw on TV. In the mid-1970s, Van Dyke's personal life became even more complicated. He started having an affair with Michelle Triola, who worked as his agent's secretary. At first, it was just phone calls and lunches, but it quickly turned into a serious relationship. He worked hard to keep it a secret, juggling time with both Margie and Michelle. It was exhausting, and he felt guilty all the time. Eventually, he told Margie about the affair, and they separated. After 8 years, they divorced in 1984. Van Dyke and Michelle stayed together for over 30 years, but never got married. She passed away in 2009, just a year after Margie died from cancer. Despite all his struggles, Van Dyke stayed a beloved entertainer. He kept working even when his personal life was hard. He also tried to use his experiences to help others. After losing his granddaughter to Reye syndrome, he appeared in ads to warn parents about the dangers of aspirin for kids. He also spoke openly about his struggles with alcohol, hoping to inspire others to get help. Later in life, Van Dyke found peace. He stayed active in his church and loved reading about faith and spirituality. At 95, he credited his wife Arlene Silver for keeping him healthy. She made sure he worked out regularly, and he joked that her energy kept him young. Dick Van Dyke has had an amazing career filled with awards. He won his first Emmy in 1964 for playing Rob Petrie in The Dick Van Dyke Show. People loved his funny and charming characters so much that he won again in 1965 and 1966 for the same role. He became one of the biggest comedy stars of the 1960s. Later, in 1976, when he was 50 years old, he surprised everyone by winning another Emmy for Van Dyke and Company, proving he could still entertain and adapt to new kinds of shows. Then in 2024, something incredible happened. At the age of 98, he won an Emmy for acting in Days of Our Lives. This made him one of the oldest Emmy winners ever. It was shocking because he started his career in comedy, but showed he could also handle serious roles. Over his life, he has won 6 Emmys and been nominated 10 times. In 1984, he even won for a children's program called The Wrong Way Kid. And in 2015, when he was 89, he got nominated for doing a voice in Mickey Mouse Clubhouse. He stayed relevant for generations, which is so rare. Van Dyke didn't just shine on TV. He made history in music, too. In 1965, he and Julie Andrews won a Grammy for the Mary Poppins soundtrack. Songs like Chim Chim Cherie became famous all over the world. People sometimes joke about his Cockney accent in the movie, and even Van Dyke laughs about it, calling it the worst Cockney accent ever. But the soundtrack was a huge hit, staying at the top of the charts for weeks and selling millions of copies. Van Dyke also recorded other albums during his career, showing that he wasn't just an actor. He could sing and entertain in so many ways. In 1995, he was honored by being inducted into the Television Hall of Fame. This award celebrated everything he had done for TV. He was only 69 at the time, but his career was already legendary. During the ceremony, Van Dyke gave a heartfelt speech and joked about still not knowing what he really does. It was a perfect example of how humble and funny he is. The Hall of Fame didn't just recognize his acting. It also celebrated how he worked to create positive shows, especially for kids. Van Dyke has also received many Lifetime Achievement Awards. One of the biggest was the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award in 2013, when he was 87. It was special because it was voted on by other actors. At the event, Van Dyke surprised everyone by singing and dancing, showing that he still had the energy and charm he was known for. He even made fun of his old Cockney accent from Mary Poppins, making everyone laugh. In 1998, Disney honored him with a Disney Legends Award for his role in Mary Poppins and Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. During the ceremony, he revealed something surprising. He didn't take any money for playing Bird in Mary Poppins because he just wanted to be part of the movie. In 2021, at age 95, he received the Kennedy Center Honors. This is one of the highest awards in American culture, and it showed how much people respect his work. During the event, performers from different generations thanked him for inspiring them. Even his high school in Illinois honored him by naming their auditorium after him in 2010. Dick Van Dyke recently talked about things from his past that surprised everyone. He revealed that working on the Dick Van Dyke Show wasn't always as perfect as it seemed. Although he and Mary Tyler Moore looked like a great pair on screen, their off-screen relationship was more complicated. Van Dyke said he wasn't sure at first if Moore, who was 11 years younger, was the right choice to play his wife. He even told the show's creator Carl Reiner that she felt too young for the role, but Reiner convinced him by saying, "Nobody will notice." There were also problems with Rose Marie, another co-star on the show. Rose Marie felt jealous of Moore because she thought Moore got more attention. This caused tension on set, and at one point she confronted Carl Reiner about it. Reiner tried to settle things by making a blunt comment, saying, "You both have great legs. They just prefer to look at hers." This shows that behind all the laughs and charm of the show, real feelings and conflicts were happening. Van Dyke also shared personal stories about his life. In 2024, he admitted to having an affair with Michelle Triola during his marriage to his first wife, Margie Willett. The affair started in 1976 after he and Willett were separated and lasted until Triola passed away in 2009. Many fans were shocked by this because Van Dyke was always seen as having a steady and drama-free life. Even he described the situation as unbelievable, showing how complex his personal life was. He also talked about Mary Tyler Moore again, revealing that he had a crush on her while they worked together. This added a new twist to their famous partnership. But since both of them were in relationships, nothing ever came of it. Van Dyke said the feeling stayed unspoken, which added a bit of tension to their connection. Another surprising story was about his friendship with Walt Disney. Van Dyke said Disney personally made sure he got the role in Mary Poppins. Some people didn't want him in the movie because of his bad Cockney accent, but Disney believed in him. This showed how much Disney trusted Van Dyke, and helped create one of the most loved movies ever made. Now, as Van Dyke gets close to 100 years old, people are looking back at how much he's influenced entertainment. In October 2024, the Television Academy announced a big tribute to his career. They shared that over 500 TV shows since the 1960s were inspired by his work. That's not just comedies, but dramas and even reality shows. His unique mix of funny and heartfelt performances has left a huge mark on the industry.